theoretically have 20 versions of the proposal, and one of those is the final version. I can get it to copy only the final version or every single one of the versions if I want to. I can also get it to include all the attachments, so I'm not starting from scratch, for instance. And this is where I can select a different unit. And once I copy the proposal, it'll open a new proposal, and it'll basically let me know that it was copied and from where. Give it a second while it does that. So this is my new proposal. It's given me a new ID. Has all the same information I added before, except I've changed the lead unit. And up here on the top, and I don't think you can see it very well, but it says copied from document ID. And this number right here is the first proposal number I had. So basically this proposal that we started off with. So that kind of creates a chain of where you know what's been copied from what, so that you can get back to the original proposal if you need to. So I'll go ahead and move back to the Proposal Actions tab, and we'll finish talking about those. The route log and ad hoc recipients are really all about workflow. So the route log tells you, it gives you some basic information about the proposal, when it was started and who it was started by, the last time, when it was created and the last time it was modified. It also gives you some additional information about the status of the proposal, both current status and what's going to happen next. So actions taken, always likes to do this to me. Actions taken is basically the last action taken on the document. So the initial one was here. I created and saved the document. The pending action requests really to show what's going to happen next. So before this can be routed into the future actions, I would need to basically complete the document and submit it. Once I've done that, it'll kick off the future action requests. And so this is a list of all of the people who need to approve the proposal. In this case, there's a pretty long list. In the case of workflow on a proposal, these things are handled by what we call nodes. So if you use a really common example, a lot of the schools on the KC project handle workflow on a proposal in a really similar fashion. And that is that, PIs and co-PIs need to approve the proposal. Those PIs and co-PIs, departments need to approve it, and then the colleges need to approve it. Then after that, it goes to the sponsor projects office, which is basically the stop. That's just one example of how workflow might work on a proposal. And the way that it works is that each of those areas is a node. So if PIs and co-PIs is a node, that means that any one of the PIs, co-PIs can approve. It doesn't have to happen in any. So if there are 5 of them, they can do it in whatever order they need to. They can do it the same. That needs to work. The next node is departments. So node 2, departments, doesn't get kicked off until node 1, PI, is complete. So while there is some ability for the people within a node to approve in whatever order they need to, once you can't move to the next node until the previous node is completed. And once we get to questions, if that doesn't make sense, please let me know. But basically, you can set up the nodes however you need to, so that in workflow it can be as flexible as you need it to be to get the right approvals for your campus. And the example I give is only one of many that workflow in Kuali can handle. Another thing that workflow can do for you is, we assume that, a person setting up KC at their school will set up workflow in advance, of course, for all their proposals, and they can refine who needs to approve proposals when and set the parameters for those kinds of things. But there might be occasions on specific proposals where people who are not normally in the workflow chain need to see it. So if somebody, in my previous example of PIs, departments, colleges, and then sponsor projects, if somebody other than those folks needs to see this particular proposal or even approve it because it's got some unusual scenario that doesn't typically require them, but in this case it does, we can ad hoc route to them. And we can give them a couple of different items to choose from. I can add a person and ask that they approve it. This will not interrupt typical workflow, so it doesn't interrupt the nodes. It basically throws them in there, and they get an email, shows up in their action list so that they can approve it. they can acknowledge it, which doesn't mean the same thing as approval, but ask that they go in and click the acknowledge button, the sort of yes, I saw that this is there button. And there's also an FYI where they can get an email. It'll show up in their action list, but they don't actually have to take any action at all. They can take a look at it or not even open it at all, but it sends them a notification saying that it's there. The same is true of work groups. One of the things in the route log that we didn't get to see, since this one isn't set up that way, is that approvals can happen via work group as well as person to person. So let's say a department head's name is listed in the workflow as someone who needs to approve, and she always does the approvals herself. But in the sponsor projects office, you probably have 4 or 5 people who are looking at proposals every day. So the pre-award area might be its own work group, where only one person in that work group needs to take action on the document to approve it. But it shows in the action list of the entire group so that everyone knows what's going on, and there isn't risk of it being sent to someone who's on vacation or sick, for instance. There's always someone looking at that inbox. You can also add a work group versus a person with the same different options for taking action on the document. The work groups are set up through Kuali Enterprise Workflow, which is a part of RICE. Last but not least on the proposal is Medusa. This section is a bit under development, so I'm not sure what we're going to see. We're not going to see very much. But this is a way of showing in a graphical way what proposals are linked to what awards and vice versa. So what you get when you start adding information into the Medusa area, once there are actual awards that are related to proposals, you can see that an award is maybe related to 5 different proposals, a new one and a bunch of different continuations. And you can also see which awards are related backwards to which proposals. It basically shows it in a tree structure, and that's what Medusa does. That said, we'll move from the proposal and into the budget. The budget has a lot of different complex calculation engines going for it. One of the nice things about budget is that it takes checking for math completely out of the equation in proposal review. It's one of the things that my office is the most excited about right now, is that things like employee fringe benefits and F&A rates are calculated with the appropriate exclusions. So those kinds of things are a known quantity with the calculation engine behind the system, and they can spend more time looking at things like allowability of costs and other budgeting items that make the budget a little bit better than it could be. One of the things that Budget Versions does, I've already started one version here. I can have as many versions of this budget I'd like to have. The only thing that's really required of me is that I could have 10 versions of a budget. I just need to mark one of them as final before I submit it into routing, so that the system knows which budget version is the right one, so that once we get to the award, I can bring this budget into the award, and it's the final proposed budget that I can then sync up with the award so that it can be put into an account in my financial system. But other than that, I can work on the budget in any way I like before I make one final. I generated one budget version. I can make copies of this. I can create an additional budget from scratch and just make as many as I need to. But we'll go ahead and open the budget version I already have. What this does is it brings in your start and end date from the proposal. It brings in some additional information. I've only generated 1 year of the proposal budget, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. You can flag as to whether or not you intend to create a modular budget from the detailed budget, and we'll talk about modular in a little more detail later. It allows you to set basically the base of the proposal so that the calculation engine works correctly for both unrecovered F&A for cost sharing and for F&A applied to the proposal. And you can add comments. Allows you to set on and off campus flag for all of the budget items, and I'll show you a little bit later how you can change that for certain budget line items. The default is all on, so that everything is calculated with an on-campus F&A rate, but you can set it to all off, and you can even set the on and off campus calculation to different line items, and we'll go ahead and show that in a few minutes when we get into the budget line item detail. The rates page show you all of the indirect cost, fringe benefit rates, inflation rates that might apply to this proposal. And this is handled via a maintenance document by your school, so you can set these